My family worshipped my sister. Then my 15-year mother's secret slipped out. I've always heard people say family dinners are where love is shared. In my family, those dinners felt more like a courtroom where every word was evidence, and I was always the defendant. That Christmas, the house was glowing with lights. My sister Grace's children darted around the dining room, while my parents smiled proudly at her perfect holiday setup. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles filled the air. To anyone else, it would have looked like a picture-perfect Christmas. But to me, it felt like sitting at a table with a loaded gun pointed straight at me, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. I was used to being overlooked. Grace had always been the star, the piano prodigy, the Ivy League graduate, the doctor's wife, with the big suburban home. I was the quiet one, the tech guy who never quite made sense to my parents. Even after I built my company, they barely asked questions. Buddy works with computers, my mom would say, as if that summed up my entire life. That night, I tried to blend into the background like always. I made small talk with Marcus's parents, complimented the food, and even played along with Grace's endless commentary about her new summer house. But the tension was already there, coiled in my chest. The toast began, Marcus raising his glass, Grace smiling like a queen. Each person around the table shared what they were thankful for. Grace spoke for nearly 5 minutes, listing her thriving practice, her board appointment, her kids' gifted program, her Nantucket home. My parents nodded, glowing with pride. Then it was my turn. All eyes shifted to me, but not with warmth, more like obligation. I swallowed hard and said, I'm grateful for the lessons of the past few years, for challenges that forced me to grow, and for the freedom to create my own path. Grace gave a tight smile. How philosophical, she said, dismissing me before signaling the caterers to serve. I thought I was safe, but halfway through dinner, Marcus started talking about a major hospital acquisition. The company's security division was bought by tech giant last year, he said. Brilliant technology, revolutionized how banks protect transactions. Gerald, his father, asked casually. What was the company called? Secure Transact, Marcus replied. My fork froze, my chest tightened. Grace tilted her head. Wait, Buddy, isn't that? I looked at her evenly. Yes, that was my company. The entire table went silent. Marcus blinked. You founded Secure Transact. The acquisition was for what, $15 million? I nodded, calm, controlled. My dad's fork trembled midair. My mom's mouth fell open. Grace's wine glass slipped from her hand, staining the white tablecloth red. She didn't even notice. Her voice cracked as she whispered, $15 million. And just like that, the gun went off. The silence at the Christmas table after my confession was suffocating, but it wasn't new. That silence had followed me since childhood. It was the sound of being invisible. Growing up, our house on Maple Street looked like the suburban dream. White picket fence, basketball hoop in the driveway, golden retriever wagging its tail. But inside, there was an unspoken order. Grace shone, and I lived in her shadow. Grace was 3 years older, but it may as well have been a lifetime. She was the golden child, Mozart at 7, spelling bee champion year after year. Straight A's, pinned proudly to the fridge. Every success was celebrated with balloons, cakes, and long phone calls to grandparents. Me, I loved soccer and computers. When I won my first tournament trophy, Mom glanced at it and said, That's nice, honey. Put it in your room. Dad didn't even look up from grading papers. That trophy ended up shoved in my closet. Because what was the point of displaying it if nobody cared? Birthdays told the same story. Grace had princess cakes, 30 guests, and magicians hired to entertain. For me, a grocery store cake sometimes days late after Mom and Dad finished with Grace's competitions. We'll celebrate this weekend, buddy. Grace has her recital tonight. Even in daily life, the hierarchy was obvious. Grace got new clothes every school year. I got hand-me-downs from the neighbor's kid. Her achievements filled a scrapbook in the living room. My computer projects were never mentioned. My soccer games came and went without my parents in the stands. But when Grace played piano at the school assembly, the whole family took the day off work. The phrase I heard most, why can't you be more like your sister? It was the soundtrack of my childhood. By high school, I had stopped trying to compete. Grace's path was clear, Yale Law School, perfect fiancé. My path was something my parents didn't understand. I stayed up late, teaching myself to code, fixing old computers, building websites for local businesses. At 16, I was already making more money on weekends than my summer job paid. But I kept that to myself. Praise never came, and disappointment stung less when I expected it. I remember one dinner like it was yesterday. Grace had just gotten her acceptance letter to Yale. The table was buzzing, Dad talking about Ivy League traditions, Mom planning trips to the campus. I slipped in a quiet comment, I've been coding an app for small businesses. I think it might actually sell. No one heard me. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. Mom poured more wine. Dad said, That's nice, buddy. Did you congratulate your sister? I smiled, but inside something hardened. That was the night I decided to stop chasing their approval. When college came, the difference grew sharper. Grace toured elite schools across the country with both parents in tow. My college prep was a stack of brochures and a single meeting with a counselor. Most of our college fund went to Grace's tuition, Mom explained. You'll figure something out, buddy. And I did. I earned scholarships, worked part-time jobs, and studied computer science at a state university. For the first time, I felt free. No spotlight, no comparisons, just me and my code. It was there that Professor Jenkins noticed me fixing a stranger's laptop and invited me to his advanced seminar. For once, someone actually saw me. He told me, You've got a rare gift, technical depth, and business vision. Don't waste it. His words stuck. For the first time in years, I believed I might be more than Grace's shadow. But back at home, nothing changed. Calls from my parents were rare and predictable. Grace just made law review, Mom would gush. Grace and Marcus are buying a house. My news winning a state coding competition, landing on my first clients, barely earned a nod. Looking back now, I realized that's when the fracture in our family truly began. Not when I sold my company, not when I sat at that Christmas table, but in those small moments when they made me invisible over and over again until invisibility became my identity. So when I looked at their stunned faces after revealing my company's sale, it wasn't just about money. It was decades of silence finally speaking for me. College was where my double life began. To my parents, I was the average kid at a state school barely keeping up. To myself, I was quietly building something they couldn't see and maybe didn't want to. My dorm room was barely big enough for a bed and desk, but in the glow of my computer screens, I felt limitless. While Grace posed for pictures at Yale's Gothic arches, I spent nights coding until my eyes blurred, fueled by instant ramen and vending machine coffee. At 19, I built a scheduling program for a local diner. Nothing fancy, just a way to stop double booking shifts. They paid me $200. I remember staring at the check, realizing it wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that my work had value even if my family never saw it. By junior year, I launched a small app for neighborhood businesses. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. My professors took notice. "You got something real here, buddy," one told me. I smiled, but inside I felt a sharp ache. Why couldn't my parents ever say that? The calls from home didn't change. Mom would gush. Grace and Marcus are engaged. The wedding's in Cape Cod next summer. You'll love it if you can take time off from your computer thing. Dad would chime in. Buddy, maybe think about law school or a stable job. Not everyone can play games forever. Games, that's what they thought I was doing, playing. I stopped correcting them. It hurt less to let them believe I was wasting my time than to hear the mockery in their voices when I told the truth. After graduation, I had choices. Big tech companies dangled salaries and benefits. But I couldn't shake the idea of building something of my own, something that mattered. So I packed my life into 2 suitcases and flew to California with $12,000 in savings and a prototype security system scribbled on napkins. My new apartment was a shoebox above a laundromat. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and cockroaches scattered when I turned on the light. But in that tiny space, I poured everything into my code. I lived on ramen, worked 100 hours a week, and slept on a mattress on the floor. My neighbors banged on the walls when my typing kept them awake, but I didn't care. I was chasing something bigger than sleep, and then betrayal. An early contractor I trusted stole my code and sold it to a competitor. I found out when their glossy press release announced innovative new security protocols, my protocols. I wanted to quit. I wanted to call my parents to hear someone say, "We believe in you." But I knew what I'd hear instead. "We told you so." So I fought. I lived in my office, showered at the gym, and drained the last of my savings on lawyers. For 3 months, I barely saw the sun. I coded through panic attacks fueled by bitterness and a stubborn refusal to die quietly. And just when I thought it was over, when the company account had only $200 left, the phone rang. A regional bank executive had seen my work, my real work. He told me, "We don't want the copy. We want the original." That deal saved me. It gave me a foothold. 1 bank became 5, 5 became 50. My team grew, investors called, and suddenly the kid coding in a cockroach-infested apartment was running meetings in San Francisco skyscrapers. All the while, my family had no idea. To them, I was still the invisible son fumbling with some computer thing. Grace sent Christmas cards bragging about Marcus's residency and their new house in Boston. Mom wrote that she wished I'd find something stable like your sister. I never corrected them. I never told them about the offices, the clients, the patents. Some wounds cut too deep, and mine whispered, "They don't deserve to know." But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: every late night, every broken ceiling tile, every betrayal had turned me into something stronger, something they couldn't see yet. I was building in shadows. And one day, those shadows would stretch across the entire table. Success didn't arrive with fanfare. It crept in, like dawn, soft and quiet, until suddenly the room was flooded with light. One client became 10, then 20. My software, what I'd once scribbled on coffee-stained napkins, was now running quietly behind the scenes of small banks across California. Transactions that used to be vulnerable were suddenly untouchable. And people started to notice. Investors called, recruiters emailed. I ignored most of them. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was chasing resilience. I wanted my creation to be bulletproof. By year 3, we were a team of 50 working out of a converted warehouse. We had leaks when it rained, and the air conditioning gave out every other week, but it was ours. A family built from scraps and stubbornness. I'll never forget the morning the offer came. My lawyer slid the papers across the table. Tech giant, one of the largest companies in the world, wanted to buy us. $15 million. For a long moment, I just stared. My fingers traced the embossed letterhead. 15 million. My parents had once scolded me for wasting time on video games. Grace had laughed at me for not having a real career. Now those wasted hours were worth more than every gold star on her perfect report cards combined. But instead of telling them, I closed the folder. I didn't call home. I didn't text Grace. I walked outside, bought myself a cheap beer from the corner store, and drank it on the steps of my warehouse office. Alone. Because deep down, I knew what would happen if I told them. They'd twist it. They'd make it about themselves, about appearances, about how they'd always believed in me. The lie would taste worse than their silence. So I stayed quiet. I signed the deal, transferred my team to tech giants' offices, and wired my share to a modest account. I upgraded to a better apartment, bought a reliable car, and that was it. No yacht, no mansion, just peace. Meanwhile, the calls from home never changed. Grace and Marcus are expecting their second child. Mom announced one Sunday, as if that was the only news worth hearing. They're thinking of buying a vacation place in Vermont. Isn't that exciting? Dad added. Buddy, are you eating enough? You sound tired. Maybe you should come home for the holidays instead of working all the time. I wanted to laugh. They thought I was barely scraping by. They thought I was still invisible. And maybe I was by choice, because money hadn't solved the old ache. At night, even with millions in the bank, I'd lie awake wondering why it had never been enough to just be me. Why Grace's piano recitals were parades and my soccer trophies were dust collectors. Why my victories had to be hidden just to keep the peace. The truth was, I didn't want their applause. I wanted their eyes clear, unclouded by comparison just once. I wanted them to see me. That chance came sooner than I expected. The invitation arrived in October Thanksgiving at Grace's house in Boston. A perfect, polished email signed with both her and Marcus's names, as if it were a press release. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something tugged at me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside whispering, "It's time." So I booked the flight, packed a single bag, and prepared myself for whatever storm was waiting on the other side of that table. I didn't plan to reveal anything. But sometimes truth doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes it crashes through the door with red wine spilling across white linen. And when it did, the explosion would burn hotter than any code I'd ever written. Thanksgiving at Grace's house looked less like a holiday gathering and more like a photo shoot for a lifestyle magazine. The driveway was lined with SUVs and luxury sedans. The front lawn was lit by discreet ground lights, each shrub trimmed into perfect spheres. Even the pumpkins on the porch were symmetrical, painted in muted metallics instead of carved like something human. Grace herself was the centerpiece. She greeted each guest with that polished smile she'd perfected, the one that said, "I am both relatable and superior." Marcus hovered at her side like a well-trained shadow, pouring drinks, ushering coats, making sure nothing disrupted her orchestration. When it was my turn, she hugged me briefly, her perfume sharp and cold. "You made it," she said, as though surprised. Her eyes flicked over my clothes, pausing at the cuffs of my shirt, then darting away. Judgment disguised as hospitality. Inside, the dining room table stretched almost the length of the house. A pristine linen cloth covered it, topped with crystal glasses, china so fine you could see light through it, and a centerpiece of flowers and candles that seemed like it had been engineered, not arranged. And then came the seating arrangement, Grace's favorite game. She positioned herself at one end, Marcus at the other. Mom and Dad sat close to her like honored advisors to a queen. Marcus's parents were opposite mine, smiling politely, their posture stiff with generational wealth. Me, I was placed midway down the table between Marcus's grandmother, hard of hearing and half asleep, and one of his colleagues already slurring from his third glass of wine. It wasn't random. Grace had engineered it. She always did. Who sat where determined who mattered. And once again, I was the ghost at the margins. As the meal began, conversation flowed down the table like a current around me, not through me. Grace held court, recounting her year's triumphs. Her appointment to the hospital board, the children's gifted program, their summer home on Nantucket. Each accomplishment was punctuated by Mom's applause and Dad's approving nods. I recognized the rhythm. It was the same rhythm I'd grown up with. Grace spoke, they beamed, I disappeared. The food was exquisite, though I barely tasted it. Perfectly roasted turkey, truffle, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, with orange zest, every detail screamed curated perfection. But my appetite withered as I listened. Marcus launched into a story about a new acquisition at his hospital. "It's remarkable," he said, his voice swelling with pride. "The company's security protocols are revolutionizing cardiac imaging. Their valuation skyrocketed after tech giant acquired them last year." The name of my company, Secure Transact, rolled casually off his tongue. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. He didn't realize. He was just repeating industry news. But Grace caught the shift in my posture. Her eyes narrowed, scanning me like a hawk noticing prey twitch in the grass. "What was it called again?" asked Marcus's father. "Secure Transact," Marcus replied. "Founded by some young programmer. A prodigy, apparently. Tech giant bought it for $15 million. That was the moment Grace's glass slipped from her hand. Red wine spilled across the tablecloth, a violent slash of color against the white linen. She didn't even notice. Her eyes were on me, wide, calculating. "Buddy," she said slowly, almost choking on the words, "isn't that your company?" The table went still. Forks paused midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. I swallowed, suddenly aware of every heartbeat in my chest. "Yes," I said quietly. "That was mine." Silence. Marcus blinked, shock dawning across his face. "Wait, you're that Buddy Mitchell, founder of Secure Transact?" Mom and Dad just stared like I'd spoken another language. Grace's knuckles whitened around her napkin. "You're telling me you've been sitting on $15 million and never said a word?" The air tightened, the chandelier above us buzzing faintly like a trapped insect. All my life, I had been invisible at the table. But tonight, the spotlight had found me, and it was blinding. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the chandelier. and Marcus's grandmother tapping her spoon against her plate, blissfully unaware that the room had turned into a pressure cooker. Grace broke first, her voice pitched high, trembling with fury. This has to be a joke. A sick little prank you're pulling? I shook my head. No joke. I built Secure Transact. Tech giant bought it last year. The wine stain on the table spread slowly, a red map creeping across the linen. And in that silence, I could feel decades of imbalance snapping loose like old floorboards. Marcus leaned forward, his doctor's composure cracking into awe. The acquisition was legendary. Every hospital IT system I know talks about it. You mean that was you? Yes, I said simply. My parents looked bewildered. Dad's fork still hovered halfway to his mouth. Mom blinked rapidly, as if the truth would vanish if she didn't acknowledge it. But Grace's expression shifted from shock to indignation. $15 million. And you never told us? Never told me. Her voice rose with each syllable until it filled the room. She pushed back from the table so hard, her chair screeched against the hardwood. Guests exchanged glances, trying not to look openly fascinated by the spectacle. You let us believe you were struggling, buddy, she snapped, jabbing her finger at me. You let us feel sorry for you. You let Mom and Dad help me with my house, with the kids' tuition, while you were secretly a millionaire. I kept my voice even. I didn't let you believe anything. You never asked. That is not fair, she shouted. We always asked how you were doing. You asked if I was still doing that computer thing? I said, the bitterness leaking through despite myself. Not once did you show real interest. Marcus's parents shifted uncomfortably. His mother reached for her water glass, eyes darting to the door. One of his colleagues suddenly became very interested in the pattern of the tablecloth. Mom finally found her voice. Buddy, why would you keep something like this from us? We're your family. I turned to her, steady but tired. Because it never mattered to you unless it looked like Grace's success. Money, titles, prestige, you celebrated those. Everything else was dismissed. I didn't need another round of minimizing. Grace laughed sharp and hollow. Oh, please, don't twist this into some noble speech. You've been playing the victim your entire life, and now you're using this to humiliate us. I actually laughed then, a dry, humorless sound. Humiliate you. I lived in the background for 3 decades. Forgive me if I stopped auditioning for a spotlight that was never mine. Her face turned scarlet. You're lying. You're rewriting history to make yourself look good. She snatched the photo album she'd stacked nearby, flipping through them with frantic hands. Look, your 10th birthday party. Dad took you fishing. See? We gave you attention. Dad's cough cut through the chaos. Grace, he said hoarsely, that was one fishing trip. And it was only because you and your mother were out of town for your piano competition. Her hands stilled on the pages. The evidence, the photos, the memories, none of them painted the picture she wanted. They painted mine. Me in the background. Me at the edges. Always second. This is insane, she whispered, but her voice cracked. You were never supposed to be the star? There it was. The truth slipped free before she could stop it. The room went colder. Marcus tried to intervene, his hand on her arm. Grace. She shook him off violently. Don't you dare defend him. Do you realize what this means? He's been hiding money She broke off, swallowing the rest of the sentence, but I knew. While I carried the family legacy. While I was the chosen one. You're furious because I didn't fit the role you assigned me, I said quietly. That's all this is. Stop it! Mom cried suddenly, her voice sharp with panic. Both of you stop, this is Thanksgiving. But the turkey had gone cold, and the perfect table setting was now just a battlefield. Grace stood trembling, her voice nearly a scream. You don't get to waltz in here, drop this bomb, and act superior? You think 50 million makes you better than me? Than us? I looked at her steadily. No, but it proves I was never less. The words landed like a stone in a still pond. Ripples moved through the room. Dad set his fork down, his face pale. Son, $15 million? Yes, I said again, calm, final. Grace's lip curled. Unbelievable. You're nothing but a fraud. But her voice broke on the last word, and for the first time, I saw it not rage, but fear. Fear that the family hierarchy had cracked. Fear that her crown no longer fit. The silence that followed was suffocating. It wasn't just a dinner anymore. It was the end of the old order and the start of something none of us knew how to name. Grace's hands shook as she flipped through the thick leather album, the pages smacking against each other, like cards in a rigged deck. Her eyes were wild, hunting for proof, for some scrap of validation that would reassert the world she'd always believed in. Here she said, finally jabbing at a picture. Look, your 10th birthday. That ridiculous dinosaur cake. You had a whole party. I leaned forward. In the photo, a cake covered in lopsided green frosting sat on the table, a crude plastic dinosaur stuck on top. In the foreground, Grace 13 then posed with her arms crossed, scowling at being sidelined. In the background, half in shadow, was me. That wasn't my cake, I said. That was yours. My birthday was the week after. I got a grocery store cake that said happy birthday with no name on it. Her hand froze mid-turn. The guests around the table leaned in, despite themselves. Marcus's colleagues glanced at each other. Even his aristocratic mother, who had looked ready to bolt minutes earlier, tilted her head, studying the image more closely. Grace flipped the page faster, desperate. Fine. Here, Dad took you fishing? Just the two of you? He never did that with me. Dad's voice came low, gravelly. That was the one time, Grace. And only because you and your mother were at your piano competition in Springfield. It wasn't a tradition. It was a consolation prize. Her face blanched, but she kept going, flipping page after page. Holiday photos, birthdays, graduations. Every page told the same story, Grace at center stage, beaming with trophies or bouquets surrounded by mom and dad. And me, half in frame, clutching a soccer ball, holding a certificate nobody cared about, or simply blurred in the background. The silence grew heavier with each turn. Even the kids, restless minutes before, sat wide-eyed, as though sensing they were watching the foundation of their family crack. Grace's voice broke through brittle and thin. That's not what it means. Photos don't tell the whole story. They tell enough, I said softly. Look at them. You're always in the spotlight. I'm always an afterthought. Mom's lips trembled. She reached out, touching one of the photos a Christmas morning, where Grace ripped open a new keyboard while I sat with a single wrapped box on my lap. Her whisper barely carried. I never noticed. You didn't want to, I replied. Not cruel, just factual. Grace snapped the album shut, the clap echoing like a gavel. You're twisting everything. You always have? You just couldn't handle not being special. I leaned back, exhaustion pulling at me. No, Grace, I handled it. I built my own life because of it. You're the one who can't handle the idea that I turned out fine without your throne. She bristled, her knuckles white against the leather spine. You think money fixes everything? You think that makes you equal, not equal, I said, holding her gaze. It makes me independent, which is something you'll never understand as long as you rely on their applause. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus cleared his throat, his calm doctor's voice slicing through the tension. Grace, look at the photos again. He's right. The pattern is undeniable. She turned on him, fury flashing. Whose side are you on? I'm not on sides, he said carefully. I'm just seeing what's in front of me. The fight drained from her face, replaced with something rawer, more dangerous, shame. She shoved the album away as though distance could erase the evidence. Dad rubbed his temples. Maybe we didn't see it then? But looking now, his voice faltered. For once, he had no easy defense. The room was suffocating. Even the caterers had disappeared into the kitchen, giving the war zone space to burn itself out. Grace's voice dropped quieter now, trembling. Do you know what it's like to have your whole identity tied to being the golden child? To realize maybe you weren't the only one. After all, I blinked, caught off guard. For the first time all night, I heard not rage, but fear in her tone. Yes, I said quietly. I know what it's like to have your identity erased entirely. At least you had one. Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned away before anyone could see. Mom stood abruptly, smoothing her napkin with shaking hands. I think we should serve dessert. But the pie and coffee couldn't cover what had already been unearthed. The albums had told their own story, and it was one nobody at the table could unsee. The trial was over. The verdict had been written in ink decades ago. The dining room felt colder now, though the fire in the hearth still burned. Nobody touched their plates. The untouched slices of pie sat in front of us, steam curling upward and vanishing into the silence. Then Grace broke it. Her voice was sharp, jagged, the way glass sounds when it shatters on tile. You planned this. You waited for the perfect moment to humiliate me. In front of Marcus's parents, in front of my friends. On Thanksgiving of all days. I looked at her calm but firm. I didn't plan anything, Grace. Marcus mentioned the company. You were the one who opened the album. The evidence wasn't mine, it was ours. She laughed a brittle, humorless sound. Oh, please. You've been waiting years for this, playing the quiet, invisible son, so one day, you could swoop in with some big reveal. And now what? We're supposed to clap for you. I don't want your applause, I said. I never did. I just wanted to be seen. But you couldn't allow that, not when it meant sharing the spotlight. Her face reddened, her composure slipping further. Do you hear yourself? You sound pathetic. Always the victim. Always the poor, overlooked brother. Meanwhile, you were secretly sitting on millions while letting everyone believe you were struggling. That's not just selfish. It's manipulative. Mom reached out her hand, trembling. Grace. But Grace pulled away. No, don't defend him. He's rewriting history because he's bitter. And you're letting him. Dad cleared his throat, his voice gravelly. Grace, that's enough. She spun toward him, stunned. Enough. You're really taking his side now. After everything I've done to make you proud. After all the sacrifices I made. Sacrifices, I echoed the word, bitter on my tongue. What sacrifices? You were given everything, every advantage, every ounce of attention, every resource. And you still act like you're the martyr. Her chair screeched across the floor as she stood, fists clenched. You think money makes you better than me? Stronger without this little windfall? You'd still be the awkward boy tinkering with computers no one cared about. Don't kid yourself, you got lucky. I leaned back steady. Luck didn't keep me awake for years coding until my hands cramped. Luck didn't fight through lawsuits, betrayals, and months of sleeping on a cot in my office. Luck didn't build the algorithms Marcus just called revolutionary. That was me. Alone. For a moment, she faltered. Then her eyes narrowed. Fine, maybe you did work hard. But what kind of brother keeps $15 million a secret while his family helps pay for his niece and nephew's school? While Mom and Dad pitched in for our renovations, Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. His parents avoided eye contact. I kept my tone level. That was your choice, Grace. You leaned on them because you could. I never asked for help. I built my own life. Why should my success bankroll yours? Her jaw tightened, but her voice wavered. Because that's what family does? We share. No, I said softly. Family supports. Family shows up. Sharing isn't the problem, exploitation is. You didn't want a brother, Grace? You wanted a safety net. And you hate that I cut the cords? The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Mom's face crumpled. Tears streaked her cheeks. Stop this. Both of you. Please. This isn't what I wanted for today. But Dad didn't echo her plea. He sat back, staring at the tablecloth, then spoke with surprising clarity. Your mother's right about one thing. This isn't what we wanted, but maybe it's what we needed. Grace blinked at him, betrayed. Dad, he held up a hand. No. Listen, last night, when Buddy first arrived, I thought we'd just have a normal holiday. Keep the peace. But looking at those photos, hearing what he said, I can't deny it anymore. We didn't treat you equally. His voice cracked as he turned to me. We failed you, son. The room seemed to tilt. My father had never admitted failure in his life. Grace's lip trembled, fury giving way to something rawer. So that's it? After all these years, I'm suddenly the villain. Everything I worked for means nothing. I shook my head. No, Grace, your achievements are real, but they don't erase mine. They never did. She swayed slightly, then gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles white. The room pressed in, waiting for her explosion, but it didn't come. Instead, she whispered almost to herself, if I'm not the golden child, then who am I? Nobody answered. Marcus reached for her hand, but she pulled away, retreating toward the doorway. I can't, she stammered, then turned and fled, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The crack had widened, and for the first time, it wasn't me standing on the fault line. The echo of Grace's footsteps faded, but the silence she left behind stayed heavy, pressing against us like a storm waiting to break. The chair she'd abandoned sat at the far end of the table, still pulled slightly back. Her napkin crumpled on the plate like a white flag nobody wanted to claim. No one moved. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to hush itself, crackling softer, as if it too was wary of filling the void. Marcus finally cleared his throat. I'll check on her. His chair scraped as he stood, but his hesitation was obvious. He didn't rush after her. Instead, he looked at me, eyes conflicted. She'll calm down, eventually. I didn't answer. What was there to say? Mom dabbed at her tears, her mascara smudged, her hands trembling. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. We were supposed to have a nice dinner. Just once. Dad sighed, the sound deep and weary. Carol, maybe this was inevitable. We've been dancing around this for years. She turned on him, desperate. So what? We just let everything fall apart. We just sit here while our family tears itself to pieces. His gaze shifted toward me, and for the first time in years, it felt like he was really looking at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. It didn't fall apart tonight, he said quietly. It was cracked a long time ago. Tonight, we just saw the fault lines. Mom shook her head violently. No, I won't accept that. We loved both our children equally. Did you? I asked, my voice low but steady. Because all I remember is being invisible while Grace got the spotlight. And when I built something, when I finally had something worth sharing, I didn't bother because I already knew the reaction's silence. Her lips parted, ready with denial, but then closed again. She stared at the empty chair, eyes glistening, and I wondered if she was finally seeing the truth, not as I'd painted it, but as it had always been. Marcus's parents shifted uncomfortably, their wine glasses untouched now. Eleanor spoke, her patrician voice softened. Every family has its shadows, dear. Sometimes it takes a crack to let the light in. It was a strange thing to hear from her, a woman I barely knew. But maybe that's why it landed. Strangers can see what family refuses to. I looked at the chair again. Empty, yet somehow louder than any word spoken tonight. It represented everything: Grace's rage, my silence, my parents' favoritism, decades of imbalance and neglect. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was the one missing from the table. Dad leaned forward, his voice hoarse. Buddy, I don't know how to fix what we did. I don't even know if we can, but I want to try, if you'll let me. I studied him carefully. The man who'd once dismissed my coding as video games looked older, now diminished by the weight of what he'd never said. Maybe that was punishment enough. Trying starts with honesty, I replied. Not excuses, not rewriting the past, just honesty. He nodded, his jaw tight. Then here's the truth. We failed you. We put Grace on a pedestal and we let you fade into the background. And maybe we told ourselves it was because you were independent, because you didn't need us as much. But the real reason was simpler: you didn't fit the picture we wanted. And that was our failure, not yours. Mom gasped softly, as if hearing the confession out loud for the first time broke something inside her. She buried her face in her hands. The air shifted. For once, the weight wasn't on me to justify, to prove, to earn. The empty chair held all the proof anyone needed. Marcus still lingered near the doorway, torn between his wife and the family implosion he couldn't stop. He glanced back at me. She'll come around, he murmured, though his eyes betrayed doubt. I wanted to believe him. But Grace's world had cracked, and cracks don't close. They spread. The dinner ended, not with dessert, but with exhaustion. Guests slipped out quietly, offering polite smiles that carried more pity than warmth. The table remained half cleared, pie, uneaten wine, untouched, the empty chair still standing guard over the wreckage of a holiday that would never be forgotten. Later, in the quiet of the guest room, I sat on the narrow bed meant for the nanny and stared at the ceiling. For once, I wasn't replaying what I should have said. I had said it all, and in saying it, I had shifted something permanent. The empty chair downstairs wasn't just Grace's. It was symbolic of the space I had always occupied, present but unseen. Tonight, for the first time, it wasn't me in that chair. And I wasn't sure if that was victory or loss. Morning. In that house was quiet but not peaceful. The walls seemed to carry the echoes of last night. The raised voices, the shattering silence, the weight of truths no one wanted to hear. I woke early, the thin mattress of the third-floor guest room doing little to soften the exhaustion in my body. For a long time, I just lay there listening. No sound of children playing downstairs, no bustle of Grace directing caterers, just the creak of old floorboards and the occasional hum of the heating system. By the time I made my way down to the kitchen, the world outside was pale with dawn. I expected to find Mom already orchestrating damage control, but instead it was Dad sitting at the table alone, a steaming mug of coffee in front of him. His shoulders were slumped in a way I'd rarely seen. He looked up when I entered. Couldn't sleep either. I shook my head and poured myself a cup. The coffee was bitter, but it grounded me. For a while, we just sat there in silence, two men bound by blood, but separated by decades of misunderstanding. Then quietly Dad spoke. I saw it in the pictures last night, the albums Grace brought out. It hit me harder than anything you said. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. Every page, she was in the center. Every story, every memory. It was about her, and you. He stopped, his voice catching. You were always on the edges. I didn't see it then. I told myself you were independent, that you didn't need the same attention. But the truth is, he let out a shaky breath. We didn't want to see. It was easier to celebrate what we understood. Hearing it said out loud was almost surreal. For years, I had carried that invisible wound, convinced I was crazy for noticing. Now, finally, the person who had inflicted it was naming it himself. You can't undo it, I said quietly. And it's not just about last night. It's about every soccer game, every birthday, every time I tried to show you something and got brushed aside. That doesn't go away because you say sorry now. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the swirling coffee in his mug. I know, but I don't want it to end here. I don't want our story to be nothing but silence and regret. For the first time in years, I felt something crack open. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. Then Mom entered the kitchen. Her hair was disheveled, her robe tied tightly around her, as if she were holding herself together by sheer force. She stopped short when she saw us. Oh, you're up. Dad's jaw tightened. Carol, we need to talk. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to him. About last night, it was a disaster. Grace is humiliated, and Marcus's parents. This isn't about them, he interrupted more firmly than I'd ever heard him speak to her. This is about us, about how we raised our children. She bristled, defensive as always. We did our best. Did we? His tone was sharp, but not cruel. Or did we just do what was easiest? Did we build one child up so high that we didn't notice we were burying the other? Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. I never meant to make you feel lesser. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said softly. The words hung in the air. I saw them land, saw the way her shoulders sagged as if the truth had finally seeped through the armor she'd worn for decades. For a long time, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, she whispered, I don't know how to fix it. Neither do I admitted. But maybe it starts with not pretending anymore. Not rewriting history. Just being honest about what it was and deciding if we want something different going forward. Dad nodded in agreement, his eyes meeting mine with a kind of raw sincerity I hadn't seen before. The sound of footsteps broke the moment. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. Grace isn't coming down, he said. His tone was careful, but the strain in his face was clear. She doesn't want to see anyone right now. I wasn't surprised. Grace had built her life on being the center of attention. And last night, she lost control of that narrative. Her silence was as loud as her shouting had been. Marcus hesitated, then added quietly, she'll come around. She just needs time. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness coat my tongue. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I was done waiting for her approval. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the empty chair at the table. The same chair that had sat vacant the night before. This time, I realized it wasn't my seat. Thank you for watching and supporting the series, Full Story. If the story touches you, remember to share it with those who need to hear that true value does not need anyone's permission. See you in the next episode.